In today's Metro Weekly podcast, DC's performing artists are in the spotlight. Our lineup begins with a Neil Diamond tribute singer from Maryland, and also the gay men's chorus of DC speaking about their most recent work. Then we follow up with a review of the show, Next to Normal, at Roundhouse Theater, and finish with a bonus review of the musical, Days of Wine and Roses, in New York City.
We start the show with a post titled, David Carlin King Sparkles Like a Diamond. He brings his show of Neil Diamond hits to the fabled Birchmere Music Hall in Alexandria, Virginia. By Randy Shulman, on February 16, 2024. Neil Diamond wrote anthems to his heart and to his feelings, and all of his songs are about him, says David Carlin King. They're the story of his life. King is somewhat of an expert on Neil Diamond, the singer-songwriter who was omnipresent on American radio in the 60s and 70s. Diamond, whose greatest hits endure to this day. Sweet Caroline, I Am, I Said, Shiloh, retired from touring in 2018 due to an ongoing struggle with Parkinson's disease. But King has picked up the gauntlet, and his Neil Diamond tribute, which he performs with his group, the Gold Diamond Band, will play the Birchmere on Sunday, February 18th. We're not a tribute band, emphasizes King. This is like a Broadway act. It comes along with a narrative. I go through each of the stories about the songs. And according to King, each song in the 20-plus setlist has a story connected to Diamond's life. King's own life has traveled its own interesting path. A career singer-songwriter, he's been out as a gay man for decades, married to a partner with whom he owns and operates the luxurious Kings Bay mansion in Marion, Maryland. But he got his start in the evangelical world in the 80s, creating orchestral arrangements for Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker's PTL Club. Eventually, life buried deep in the closet got to him. I just had to come away from all that, because gay and Jesus didn't go together, he says. There was no way that I could exist as a whole person. King always had a fascination with Neil Diamond because, number one, he was popular back during the Vietnam War, and I wondered how all this happy, peppy music survived in the middle of this angry war stuff. How does this man tell such a complicated story with such simple poetry and such simple chording? He points out that the 1966 hit, Cherry Cherry, is only 3 chords. Rolling Stone magazine called it one of the best 3-chord songs of all times, he says, adding that in the show he isn't trying to trick audiences into thinking they're seeing a facsimile of Neil Diamond. I don't try to impersonate Neil, he says. I do an interpretation of Neil. I've been performing as David Carlin King for so long, I can't help but be myself. But I definitely sound like him on some of the songs. King loves much of the material, though there is one number that grates on him. Song Sung Blue, which is too sing-songy for his tastes. I have a visceral reaction to that song, he says, adding that the song remains the show's closer because audiences adore it so much. I do it as a sing-along, he grins. I have other lyrics for it, and I start having fun with the audience, you know? King is in the process of launching a new show based on the hits of the 1970s, called The Soaring 70s. It will include songs by Elton John, Billy Joel, Bad Company, and James Taylor, to name a few. During his days as a songwriter, King was hired by mattress discounters to write a jingle, the results of which, lay on it, play on it, save on it, pray on it, have a good night's sleep on us, are, to this day, embedded in the DMV's collective memory. I will sing the mattress discounters at the Birchmere, says King. I'm kind of my own person, and I can't shove away at 45 or 50 years of performing and not be David King, because that's who I am. David Carlin King and the Gold Diamond Band perform a tribute to Neil Diamond at the Birchmere. Visit www.kingsbaymansion.com for more info.
Next up, the Gay Men's Chorus evokes a museum with a work titled, Exhibitions. The latest production from the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. is unprecedented and unlike anything they have ever performed. By Doug Rule, on February 13, 2024. When Thea Kano of the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington first pitched the concept for an altogether new kind of show, members reacted with skepticism. They were all looking at me like I was a crazy woman, says Kano, the chorus's path-breaking artistic director, adding a note of self-mockery, which I'm used to. That's also known as Thursday around here. Simply titled Exhibitions, the new production, scheduled to debut on Saturday, February 17th, is bold and innovative, unconventional and unprecedented, and unlike anything the chorus has ever produced. We describe it as a movable feast of sound, harmony, and dance, Kano says. the audience will move from room to room in the Atlas Performing Arts Center on a guided tour, where they will be dazzled visually and orally by GMCW and all of our small ensembles. There's not one opening curtain, nor one audience or one performance, but many, all taking place in the historic complex. The production is structured around timed entry tickets. We'll have groups of patrons by time led from room to room by a docent. We're using museum terms, says Kano. Each audience group will take in 5 distinct programs by the organization's small ensembles as well as its full chorus, for a total of 10 distinct audiences and 10 performances by each ensemble over the course of 4 hours. It was the 10 total performances that initially raised the eyebrows of the organization's singers. Yet none of the programs last longer than 10 minutes or include more than a handful of songs. The full chorus is only performing a program of 2 songs, rather than the usual 10 to 14. That's what ultimately won over members, along with the production's promise of greater interaction and engagement with audiences. They're excited because every performance will have a different group of people, Kano says, and the maximum size of an audience group is 50 patrons. For this production, the logistics are as crucial as the performances. We're lighting 5 rooms, and really, we are producing 5 live shows, Kano says. Helping oversee those logistics is Solomon Haile Selassie, who is working in what he calls a really collaborative effort with Chipper Dean, production director, and Jared Bennett, technical director, as well as the crack technicians at the Atlas. Haile Selassie's job is to evoke the feel of going to a museum. The official stage director for GMCW for nearly a decade now, Haile Selassie will also tap into his experience as a production designer at the Library of Congress. The groups are all different and have their unique experiences that they're drawing upon and stories that they're telling, he says. Every tour will start with the Gen Out Youth Chorus, comprised of LGBTQ and allied teenagers, performing a short program, led by Paul Hines, that Haile Selassie describes as full of exuberance and joy, like a bag of Skittles that fell open. Next up, in the Atlas's other black box space known as Lab 2, is the organization's 17th Street Dance, performing a pair of choreographed numbers serving as a preview of the June season finale portraits. Meanwhile, the ensemble Seasons of Love and Rock Creek singers will team up to perform musical numbers by Stephen Sondheim and Jason Robert Brown. In the Lang Theater, Kano will lead the full chorus in a Lakota Sioux spiritual accompanied by a video created by the composer. The tour ends in the Atlas lobby, where the a cappella ensemble Potomac Fever will sing an eclectic mix of pop songs by everyone from Billie Eilish and Radiohead to Styx. The standard GMCW concert, as Haile Selassie puts it, offers a wall of sound, of 300 people singing and telling you one unified story. Here, 5 different stories will be told in a much more intimate and much more specialized way. This is a real conversation between a small group of patrons and performers. Kano wasn't inspired by any one thing in conjuring up the production, nor did she model it after any previous offering. She was merely prompted by the season's theme focused on the fusion of music with visual art, and tapped into her experiences and observations gleaned from regular outings to museums as much as her expertise in musical performance. I do try to visit a museum at least once a week, to stick my head in to enjoy the art, she says. And it probably was during one of those kind of little lunch breaks where I stepped into a Smithsonian, and I thought, they need music in here. It's really quiet. Visit gmcw.org for more information.
We move now to Bethesda, Maryland for a stage review. Roundhouse's Next to Normal is a powerhouse. Tracy Lynn Oliveira and Kevin S. McAllister scale the heights of blistering emotion in Roundhouse's stellar Next to Normal. By Andre Herford, on February 6, 2024. Any and every one us in the audience for Alan Paul's penetrating production of Next to Normal at Roundhouse might know a woman like the show's Diana Goodman. Maybe you're related to her, or see her in the mirror. You can see the truth of her embodied in the brilliant performance of Tracy Lynn Oliveira, a DC theater treasure making her Roundhouse debut as the suburban wife and mom struggling against grief, depression, and mental illness to find even some semblance of stability. Soldiering by Diana's side, and soaring alongside her through the Tony-winning score by composer Tom Kitt and lyricist Brian Yorkey, is her husband Dan, devoted yet often conflicted, portrayed by the equally esteemed Kevin S. McAllister. So, Roundhouse crowds are doubly blessed to see and hear such challenging roles essayed by those with the due talents, conviction, and gravity to send us scaling the raw, ragged mountains of emotion brought forth in Yorkie's deftly plotted script. Oliveira and McAllister marry beautifully as on-stage partners in Diana and Dan's complicated, trying existence. Their bustling family dynamic, with teenage son Gabe, played by Lucas Hines Babcock, and daughter Natalie, played by Sophia Early, is credibly set in the first number, Just Another Day, aided by effective intentional misdirection. They might seem like everything is normal, until the scene reveals Diana's tenuous hold on reality. Wilson Chin's striking scenic design suggests that liminal space between reality and what's happening in Diana's head. In her tangible world, pill bottles spill to the floor, and doors slam with force. In I Miss the Mountains, she tries to toss out her meds and live with the peaks and valleys. But in her thoughts, she's haunted by pain she can't process. Though Paul offers acute insight into her experience, employing a wall of video panels, featuring sometimes trippy projections designed by Nicholas Hussong, the screens become a means of amplifying all the characters' feelings, as well as the tension of Diana's encounters with extreme medical intervention. The visual spectacle can distract from vital beats of song or dialogue, but the device adds a subtle tinge of horror that suits aspects of this probing portrait. And throughout, Paul navigates the cast gracefully through delicate transitions from an average family's quotidian rhythms into the dark, imaginary caverns of Diana's struggles. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, her struggles reverberate through all their lives. Yet, she maintains a sense of humor, exemplified in the charmingly sardonic My Psychopharmacologist and I. As said psychopharmacologist, Calvin McCullough contributes his own deft comic timing to the number. That song pairs with Dan's more serious Who's Crazy, with him contemplating his own struggles in this marriage, and McAllister beautifully relaying a spouse's sense of duty and exhaustion. As their daughter, spiraling into her own chaos of drugs and confusion, Early captures Natalie's justifiable defiance, alongside her deeply felt sadness. The whole family's understandably exhausted, while, paradoxically, the cast, including Ben Clark, who shines as Natalie's amorous classmate Henry, in his Hey duets with Early, must tap into wells of stamina to put across Kit and Yorkie's challenging score and emotionally taxing narrative. Probing universal truths about grief and depression via the very specific circumstances of one loving family, this next to normal pierces the heart, provokes vital conversation, and brings powerhouse performance and music to our ears. Next to Normal earns a 4 out of 5 stars review. The show is slated to run at the Roundhouse Theater in Bethesda, Maryland. Visit www.roundhousetheater.org for details.
We finished today with a bonus review from New York City, Bottle Service, Days of Wine and Roses. The new contemporary musical Days of Wine and Roses explores a fraught romance bound together by the bottle, by Ryan Leeds, on February 11, 2024. Just in time for dry January, the wettest musical of the season, Days of Wine and Roses, opened on Broadway. On January 28, as so many New Yorkers, committing to the New Year's resolutions, were doing their best to give booze a break, Joe Clay, played by Brian Darcy James, and Kirsten Arneson, played by Kelly O'Hara, were careening full speed ahead down a liquor-laced path of destruction on a theater stage that once housed Studio 54, a club that infamously embraced excess as a philosophy of life. My, how times have changed. And oh, what a fine line it is between not drinking and polishing off the bottle. Or several, as it were, for Kirsten, the 1950s secretary who works in the same San Francisco public relations firm as Joe. One night at a client event, the two connect with one another. Initially, Kirsten rebuffs the smooth-talking executive and is offered to get her a cocktail. I don't like the taste, she tells him. The taste? He questions. It's for the fun. Quickly, he wins her over and the pair ditch the clients for a restaurant. After confessing a nuttiness for chocolate, Joe slyly has the waiter bring a brandy Alexander, a sweet libation comprised of cognac, creme de cacao, and fresh cream. In moments, she is carefree and giddy, and the two frolic along the river. It doesn't take a psychic to grasp where the story is headed. After settling down and having a child, the pair's frequent happy hours turn into long unhappy days, unemployment for Joe, and life-threatening incidents for Kirsten, who has developed a yen for vodka vacuuming. Eventually, the family is forced to live with Kirsten's curmudgeonly father, who is still grieving the loss of his wife. Stage legend Byron Jennings tackles the role and infuses what could be a rather unlikable character with glimpses of humanity and pain. Music and lyricist Adam Guettel and book writer Craig Lucas have collaborated again after teaming in 2005 for the multiple award-winning Broadway musical The Light in the Piazza. This time, they've adapted Days of Wine and Roses from a 1958 play by J.P. Miller and a subsequent film starring Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick. The film has been preserved in the United States National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. While the musical treatment may not reach such status, the story has undeniably touched lives and has forced many to confront and seek help for their own disease of alcoholism. Days of Wine and Roses reinforces the fact that excessive drinking is not a moral failure. Upon seeking help, Joe's Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor Jim, played by David Jennings, explains. You wouldn't tell a diabetic they can't handle their sugar because they have some character flaw. If you're like me, and you're a big old drunk, Joe. We can never drink. Join the party and celebrate. We never have to drink again. That's the good news. Good news is hard to find in Days of Wine and Roses, but the painfully heartbreaking tale is one of poignancy, richness, and beauty. This show marks another reunion for James and O'Hara, who shared the Broadway stage in another bleak tuner, Sweet Smell of Success. Their chemistry is remarkable, and through all of their pain and suffering, their commitment to one another is inspiring to watch. Also admirable is their ability to play drunkards. Too often, depictions are unrealistic and overacted. Yet both do a fine job of showing the insidious way alcoholics range from comical and giddy to tragic and dangerous. It's unlikely anyone will leave humming anything from the score. Unlike his grandfather, the late Richard Rodgers, Guettel opts more for a more highbrow, contemporary classical approach that feels more technical than emotional. Sometimes it works, eliciting jazzy and jaunty notes, but more often than not the cacophony and dissonance feel as though it were written to impress an Ivy League music theory professor. Metaphorically, it makes sense given the scrambled, blurry thinking of our leading lovers. Orally, however, it's not terribly pleasing. For Guettel, there is personal relation to the material. The composer has openly shared his struggles with addiction. In a 2003 interview with the New York Times, he said, "I've risked my life so many times now, in cars where I can barely see, doing cocaine and drinking and driving. And it's never over. Because it's not just a disease, it's me, it's knowing how much I could do if I kept it together, if I had the courage and stamina and willpower." Lucas' book delves into the past of Joe and Kirsten, leading us to believe that they are alcoholics due to unresolved trauma and childhood issues. Perhaps that is true, but his greater point, without proselytizing or moralizing, is that regardless of one's station in life, alcohol can be an equal opportunity destroyer for those chemically predisposed to it. But help is available to the willing. Lizzie Clocken's scenic design, lit with foreboding hues of bleakness, adds depth to this sad tale. Director Michael Greif holds the piece with a steady hand, grounding it in harsh reality and ensuring that it never veers into melodramatic territory. Days of Wine and Roses is certainly adult fare, free from the frivolous and lightheartedness components that often comprise American music theater. For those who value story and fine acting over kicklines and jazz hands, it's a fine pick. Days of Wine and Roses at Studio 54 Theater in New York City. Visit www.daysofwineandrosesbroadway.com.
And that's it for this episode. Your support of Metro Weekly is greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the launch of our new podcast. If you have a moment, please hit like or leave a review on your podcast service or a comment on our Metro Weekly YouTube channel. And visit www.metroweekly.com anytime for more entertainment news.